All right, let's take this further now and speak to Duma Gqubule, who's an economist working with mining communities. Duma, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for coming in. Let's start with your reaction to the death toll, because it's one really thinks about the numbers, and some are saying, is it really a true reflection? Because you're also seeing numbers, for example, that are being put out by GIUSA in one of their, their WhatsApp groups, but at the same time, then you're getting numbers from the SABC as well. Let's talk about your reaction to all of this.
Yeah, it's one of the darkest days in South African history. It's up there with Sharpeville massacre in 1960. Different, the Marikana massacre, as you've said, and now this one. If you see, it is just unfortunate, man. It's just a disaster in South Africa. And how did we come to this, that people think it's okay to starve people to death? Because that's what happened, And I can't believe that the media has been pushing this, the false narratives, and the false narratives and the fabrication of the cops. First of all, let's just talk about the calling people illegal miners when they haven't been charged, or prosecuted in a court of law. I've never come across that in my history, in the media and in monitoring the media. So this, when you dehumanize people, call them illegal miners, as we've seen in Gaza, it means that everything is okay, what you can do to them. They can die in those terrible situations under the underground. Yeah.
I suppose, though, we're taking it from both sides, because the SAPS was also arguing with government as well that the media was also purporting what the community is saying, to say that we are saying there's 4,000 of them underground and all of that. We get attacked on different sides, but all we do is that if police are saying that these are suspected illegal miners.
But nobody says suspected illegal miners, but when politicians go to, court for corruption cases, no one calls them criminals, until you've been charged in a court of law. And I just think it's shameful that the media has perpetuated this kind of language. And also the fabrication of the cops, these shafts are different. Margaret Shaft, it's an operational mine. It is 20 kilometers from shaft 11 and 10. And there is the Harmony Gold, which is pumping water at that shaft, said in court that there is no link between Margaret and the other two. So the people can't move from as the cops wanted to do them, to move from 11 and 10 to Margaret. That is just impossible.
So the fact that we just heard now Deboho saying that there were people coming out of Margaret, for you that doesn't...
That's completely separate, because we're talking about shafts 10 and 11. So the crisis is at shaft 10 and 11. So Margaret people are coming out, they come out with a lift, and it's complete, they're not even linked, because the tunnels underground, what we're hearing, is that they're flooded and collapsed. And this is what the company that owns Margaret has been saying. Now, the second thing that people need to understand is that shaft 11 is almost 2 kilometers down. There was no way for people to come out without assistance from the surface. And as you've seen for the past 5 months, since August 18, when the cops went there, nobody has come out of shaft 11 without assistance from above, either through the rope or through the cage. So nobody has just walked out of shaft 11. So there was this debate, are they trapped, are they not trapped? So if they were not trapped, why do we have to send a cage and a rope to rescue them? Because they can't come out. Yeah. And this was just fabrication by the cops, that they can come out, they're there of their own will. It's a mass suicide. That is just, and I think the media should have called them out for the lies and fabrications that we're talking about here.
I'm going to get to the latter part of what you've just said in just a moment, but you've argued, and I'm quoting from what you've said, that there's no logic in the way in which the operation in Stilfontein was conducted, and that this is a desperate attempt to get electoral support.
Yes. So I can't see logic for this. It's like the government is saying that, I just think that the government is, there was an electoral collapse. They want to be seen to be doing something for crime. And they are pandering to the lowest common denominator in society, the bigots who want to see dead bodies. Now, we have a constitution. We're a constitutional democracy. What is so difficult to understand that? Everyone has right to life, right to dignity, right to food, and none of these rights depend on your legal status or your nationality. But there's been this xenophobic narrative that is pushed across South African society because they're foreign nationals, international migrants. They are anything can happen to them. That is wrong. Our constitution doesn't allow that. Everybody who is in South Africa has those rights, yeah.
And when it comes to Police Minister Senzo Mchunu yesterday, because this was one of the questions to him, to say that you've been criticized in how government has been handling this and also listening to what Makua has had to say. One of the things that the minister said to us is that this is not the time for us or even yourselves or anybody who's involved in this matter to be apportioning blame, but it is time for cool heads as now they're trying to resolve the crisis. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I felt sad when I was watching Senzo Mchunu and the minister was taught by my mother, and he was there at the launch of a school, that my mother set up, and I just find it heartbreaking. And the deputy minister was saying that, no, we were in meetings. Why didn't they do this in November? This rescue opportunity. So the deputy minister says we're in meetings every day until now. Meetings about what? Why didn't they do what all of us were saying they must do? Send up this crane and this thing to get the people out. What is so difficult about that? And then there was this narrative that it will cost too much. The quote from the Mine Rescue Services was 11.3 million rands. I have it at home. And that is spare coins in the context of a 2.4 trillion budget. It is spare coins in the context of 30 billion rand that we spend as a country managing prisons. If we had to decide to starve prisoners who are convicted criminals, that would be seen as against human rights in our country. We can't do that. We're a constitutional democracy. Yeah.
And you've argued that, while government is talking about what's taking place at the ICJ, they should also look closely at what's happening at home.
Yes. How can you take a case to the ICJ for genocide correctly, but now you're behaving in the same way that the Israelis behave? They dehumanize the Palestinians. We are dehumanizing the artisanal miners, And the sad thing I have to say, Bongiwe, is that, there is no security solution to this issue. I've been working on mining issues for about 15 years. And from day one, I have worked with Makua in terms of issues relating to transformation of the mining industry. And I've just got to say, you will never eradicate it. There was a report that came from the World Gold Council. 20% of gold supply is from informal mining. We have to recognize informal mining, just like we recognize informal, farmers, cannabis farmers, what I'm saying? So cannabis is a 20 billion rand. All those farmers are doing it illegally, but we have to recognize cannabis as a legitimate livelihood strategy. And the same for informal mining, yes.
So, Duma, you talk about that, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that a number of organizations are talking about. There's one thing, though, the issue of kingpins. How do you begin to deal with this? Because when you listen to what the minister even said yesterday, was that some of the, the guys coming from, from underground are saying that they were forced.
Yes, they were forced, and nobody condones it. But what I do have a problem with is when Newsroom Africa have been pushing this idiotic discourse for days, that the reason the people are dying is because of the kingpins. The reason people are dying is because the government shut the hole for 3 months, from August 18 until the court case.
So for me, I mean it when it comes to, you're saying that it's time to recognize it. It's not time to run away from it.
Yes.
But the reality is, for example, in the Sabi, you had those Mozambican, and some of them were children, and they say that they were lured into the country.
Nobody condones that. But I'm saying you can't say that the kingpins are responsible for this death.
Yes, but my question, Duma, is how, in that recognition process, how does government also, and police deal with this? Is there a willingness to find these individuals who are forcing people to go down?
But if we recognize this industry and make it a recognized livelihood strategy, we would regulate the industry. Now, we've got an artisanal mining policy, but it only applies to surface mining. So now, if it applies for underground mining, what would we do? We would recognize it. We would make these people work with dignity. We would flush out those kind of practices, because now the labor law applies. And then we would have an artisanal mining development agency that provides funding and equipment. You must remember that when Village Main Reef, the owner of Stilfontein Mine, abandoned that mine, there was 11.8 million ounces underground. So the artisanal miners saw an opportunity. They went there through desperate poverty. So how can we, with funding, technology, equipment, allow these people to work with dignity? An artisanal mining development agency can also look after environmental issues, health issues, safety issues, and labor issues. And then we can have also economic research into how many people are employed in this sector, and make sure that everybody works with dignity in that sector. And so now, once you also have that, and you have also a national buyer of minerals, as you have in Zimbabwe and I think in DRC, then you shut out the kingpins. Now, the kingpins are mostly above the surface. Everybody agrees. The people at the bottom, under the mines, are the foot soldiers of this industry. So if we formalize this industry, you will get rid of the kingpins through proper labor laws underground, and also above, where most of the money is made, through these, these actual mining companies above ground, the established mining companies, because once it comes above ground, you can't tell which table it's from. Is it from the informal miners or from the established miners? So once we have a national buyer of these minerals, you shut out that whole value chain above the ground. And through the labor laws, inspections in these mines, you can shut this thing out. So now these are things that people have been talking about for a decade and more. It is something so simple that the government has to do. There is no security measure. You can starve thousands of people to death every single year. You won't kill it, yeah. In the same way, you can't burn the crops of cannabis farmers and think that that's the solution. Yeah. You have to provide alternative livelihoods for these people. Because let's remember, we have the second highest unemployment rate in the world after Eswatini. How are people going to make a livelihood? It's the government's failure to provide jobs. Yeah.
So, Duma, it sounds like we need a part two of this conversation and a bit of a debate, especially with the role players here, to get a sense as to how does all of this work out? Because 78 bodies, that's a number that even one cannot
and
even
it could have been
begin to
prevented, Bongiwe. Like, in November, I wrote in the Sunday Times that if they do nothing, this is what's going to happen. And they could have gone, by the way, that crane came in November to Stilfontein, and then it cleared up, and then it disappeared. We don't know what happened, but why didn't they start immediately in November? The same crane,
Thank you so much, Duma, for coming in. And definitely it is a conversation that doesn't seem to end here. There still needs to be quite a lot more of it that needs to be had. That's Duma Gqubule, an economist working with mining communities.